St. Louis sports fans, go deeper with STL Sports Central Insiders. Get exclusive access to Bernie, Randy, Claves, Jamal Mayers, and more. Plus, your chance to watch a Blues game in the alumni box with Jamal himself. Monthly giveaways, Bernie's columns all week, and support for local sports media. Join now at stlsportscentral.com. Well, the Cardinals made roster moves as expected yesterday before the 40-man deadline happened around 5 o'clock. We talked about it yesterday and what our predictions were. And, well, we're back at it again today to look at exactly what they did. This is Card Central 365 here on STL Sports Central. All content brought to you by DraftKings, where the crown is yours. Joe Roderick, Brenden Schaeffer with you here as usual. And Brenden, the Cardinals ended up going with 4 of the 5 names that we talked about yesterday to add to their 40-man roster. And, well, as we talked to you yesterday, they had 37 roster spots already filled. So when you add 4, you have to get rid of 1. And it's a name that you and I talked about yesterday on the show as well. So a lot going on yesterday with the Cardinals and throughout all of baseball with manipulating those rosters before the deadline. But your initial thoughts with the 4 names that they added to their list?
Yeah, the Cardinals had 5, as we had mentioned yesterday, that were considered top 30 prospects in the organization who would have been vulnerable to the Rule 5 draft if not protected by being added to the 40-man roster. The only one they end up not protecting from that group is a guy they just recently acquired in a trade, Blaze Jordan. And I think my thought yesterday was, well, they did just trade for him. It would seem like a strange conclusion not to add him. But then you do kind of look at the some of the numbers that he put together last year in AAA Memphis after coming over from the Boston Red Sox organization. Only hit 198 in AAA, had much better numbers in the AAA affiliate for the Boston club, and a 608 OPS. And so, maybe he's a guy where the Cardinals say, look, if somebody is going to pick him up and put him on their big league roster, okay, it is what it is. But we probably don't need to devote a 40-man spot at this point to Blaze Jordan. So we'll see what ends up happening there with Rule 5. But everybody else that I think was on that radar gets picked up, Joe. And then Jorge Alcala, the guy that is DFA'd. I thought yesterday, 100 miles per hour, probably somebody that you look to hold on to. Cardinals see differently. You made the point. Well, he was on 3 different teams last year, and so that maybe the writing was on the wall for that one. So I was a little bit surprised by that because I think there might still be more upside in his arm than some of the other relievers that they did keep. But they clearly were looking to make as few moves as possible to, as you mentioned, manipulate the roster and do so with maximum efficiency.
You mentioned, the 100-mile-an-hour fastball for Alcala, or Jorge Alcala yesterday. I'm looking through here, and let's see. It says here, I just did a quick Google search of this. The AI overview tells me that 192 pitchers in professional baseball, MLB, and minor leagues hit 100 miles per hour in 2025. It's just not that impressive anymore. Like I just don't think that's
I'm going to disagree with that. First of all, the AI overview is 190 something across 30 organizations. So on average, you have about 6 in an average organization. By the way, in the AI overview, I have no idea if that's true. Usually those things are wrong. But if we want to just base it on that, I'm cool with that.
82 in Major League Baseball, 140 in minor league baseball.
Yeah, if you look at the StatCast page for Jorge Alcala, his fastball velo is in the 89th percentile, which is considered great. So, yeah, I think that is a tool. The Cardinals are basically saying, look, we don't think necessarily that some of the other tools are there to be able to get a lot out of that fastball velocity. And for what it's worth, again, he didn't perform great last year across 3 different teams. So I'm not saying like, oh, terrible move or anything like that. They certainly know more about the guy than I do. But I would have thought a different guy would have been someone, that they could have possibly parted with rather than him. But again, this is not like you're talking about a bona fide future star closer in the big leagues based on him bouncing around and what different teams have seen from him. We know one thing that you like, and it's the fastball velo. Everything else on that StatCast page is blue for the most part. And I know, just to say nothing of him, personality in the clubhouse, what he brings to the table. Sometimes you take a shot on that one tool, Joe, they did with his acquisition last year, and then it worked out the way that it does. I don't really have any significant problem with that. I do think throwing 100 still matters, though, when you think about the scarcity of what that is. 89th out of 100th percentile, still pretty good for this guy.
We're not going to spend the whole episode talking about Jorge Alcala, but
we
will.
Have to, but we can if you want to.
We will move on to guys that we assume will be with the Cardinals in the near future, and that is the 4 names that they did add to the 40-man roster: Joshua Baez, Leonardo Bernal, Cooper Hjerpe, and Brycen Mautz. We'll talk about Mautz here in a bit, because he also made a little bit of news with the in the Cardinal organization earlier today. Let's start with Bernal. That's been the one that we've heard the most about, and the guy that has been talked about the most of these 4 names so far this offseason. He won the minor league Gold Glove Award just recently, and he is very young still, 21 years old, and his name is now added to the plethora of catchers that they now have on the 40-man roster. This is the 5th player that is now listed as a catcher with the St. Louis Cardinals, joining Ivan Herrera, Pedro Pagés, Joel Pozo, and Jimmy Crooks. So at some point, there either needs to be a conversation with Ivan Herrera saying, hey, listen, that's not your future, and we're telling you this now, what many people might think, or there probably need to be some other moves made in the next month or two with that catcher position, at least eliminating maybe one of those, I would think.
Yeah, and we know that Herrera is going to catch this year. Like that's not a conversation that's coming. They've said the opposite, that they're going to try it again and see what he can bring to the table behind the plate. This kind of feels like a sink or swim year for that, I would think. But behind that, what's the protection that you need as you find out about Herrera? I would think Pagés is a useful tool, a useful guy to have around, because he is another defensive stalwart who is considered to be a good manager of the pitching staff, and he's big league ready, right? Like it's not like you're rushing him along. He's going to be a career, probably, if he's a number 2 catcher or if he's a starter, primarily that's a defense first guy. That's what you're getting, and you're not going to get a whole lot from him at the plate. But he can be around, and that can work. With Pozo, he's more of the opposite of that. I don't know, necessarily. They can say nice things about him behind the plate, but I think more than anything, you liked what you saw from his bat this past season, but he's not a catcher of the future in any capacity. I don't think that you would ever look to start him a whole bunch of games in a major league season if you're the Cardinals or if you're anybody else. So, like, of the two, it feels to me that Pozo would be more expendable, because with Herrera, you've got the bat that you're trying to thrust behind the plate, but you're wondering about the defense. Pozo can also hit, but the defense is not necessarily the strong suit. With Pagés, it's more you kind of can trust what you're going to get behind the plate, and it's a good complement maybe to what Herrera would bring. And then you've got the 2 kids who, with Crooks, they like the bat. I think they want to see more from him behind the plate as he learns kind of the rigors of the big leagues. He got a cup of coffee down the stretch, and he'll come into spring training looking to make his mark and show the coaching staff that, hey, this is something that I have a handle on better than I have in the past. And then with Bernal, I think they believe with his minor league Gold Glove that he's somebody that has that side already pretty well handled, will continue to grow and progress as he raises through various levels. The bat is solid, maybe the opportunity to emerge into a above average big league bat, but he is not going to turn 22 until February. So still time for that to develop. But I think it's another year away, right? He has played in AA, probably would make sense to start him in AAA. But hard to do that unless he's splitting time with Crooks, unless Crooks finds his way onto the big league roster because they do something else with Pozo or Pagés. So that's kind of the trickle-down effect as I see it. Whereas Bernal, of the whole group, might be the one that's most likely to stick behind the plate and be able to handle the starter's workload in the big leagues. He's also the one that's furthest away in terms of experience, and probably not going to see that materialize in 2026.
Yeah, I would imagine the Cardinal organization is very much hoping that Jimmy Crooks can make the team out of camp. I think that is your best case scenario with having, whether it be Crooks or Pagés or Pozo, and then Crooks, and then Herrera. Because
so you're gonna go 3.
I think with what Herrera brings to the table, I think you have to go 3, because even if Herrera does not catch on days Herrera's not catching, he has to DH.
Yeah.
I think Herrera Herrera is going to be your number 2 or 3 hitter in the lineup next year. He has to be in the lineup every single day. This can't be a case of, oh, he's not catching today, we're going to have a completely new 2 hitter in the lineup today. So Herrera has to be there all the time. So whether it is, if you're going with Jimmy Crooks, then okay, then Pozo's your emergency catcher, and you're going with the 2 of them for that. I just think that has to be the mindset going into camp next year, is that going into the start of the regular season, is that you're going to carry 3 catchers, knowing that Ivan Herrera is going to be in that lineup every single day of the week.
And I don't want to hear a word about Wilson Contreras also being a catcher. Y'all can shut up about that, because it's not a thing.
I wrote that a lot last year. I was all on board with that last year. I have moved away from that. That is you get into a 20 inning game and something really crazy happens. Then you say, hey, do you remember how to do that in that scenario? That's the only way that makes sense anymore. He is no longer a catcher.
The Wizard has gifted the Scarecrow a brain. I'm glad that you're now coming around on that. But I do think I agree with you with the 3 catcher thing. Like, if you're going to force feed this with Herrera without really knowing what you have there, and the fact that he's a capable hitter that's going to be in the top 30 of your order, having that extra protection makes sense. You could do it if it's a Pagés Pozo, and like that's the way that it goes. I think it's more likely that you look for Crooks to make the strides and say, yeah, it's more of a Crooks could be that 3rd guy. But at his age and prospect status, do they want Crooks to be sitting around just kind of taking it all in? Is valuable in September. I don't know if that's the way that they want to continue to develop his bat and develop him as a player. And so that's kind of interesting.
That was the point I sidetracked myself there with that whole point. And that's what I was saying was, if you, that Crooks last year came, it seemed like Crooks, if you would have asked on February 1st, like, hey, who is the backup to, Pagés and Herrera, it would have been Crooks is at number 3. And then something happened in spring training where Pozo jumped over Jimmy Crooks, and Crooks seemed to fall out of favor with the organization. And we didn't hear of his name until August, September of last year. So I think right now, if the Cardinals could get Crooks on the big league roster to start the year, and you can have Bernal in AAA, being that AAA starting catcher all season, I think that definitely puts them in that better spot to be competitive after next season by 28 in the eyes of the front office.
Yeah, I would also argue, though, that nothing really had to happen with Crooks. He had never been to AAA prior to 2025. So I don't necessarily think he lost a step. I think he was progressing along as he would, and the realization of he's got strides to make in terms of the complete nature of the position behind the plate. Not that he was behind, but like he had not gone through that progression yet. And he went through it enough in a season at AAA Memphis where by the end of the year, they're like, let's bring him up and expose him to the big leagues. What that hopefully will inspire for him is an offseason that allows him to really take that in and use it as the fuel he needs to show up in spring training as a guy who's pushing for an opportunity. Because, yeah, there might be a catcher that's lopped off the 40-man between now and February, but maybe there's not, and you kind of you can maneuver some of that next year. I don't know for sure how likely that would be. I would still, if I had to bet on it today, say you're going to go into February with 4 on your 40-man roster instead of 5. But like, it seems as though if you think, okay, Crooks is ready to kind of be the backup and you could have Pozo as an emergency catcher, a name you didn't say is Pagés. So in your view, are they trading Pagés? Because I would be very surprised if Pagés is a guy that's moved, honestly. If he's traded, that would I wouldn't say shock me, but it would surprise me over, a jettison of Pozo, or a case where, yeah, you know what, Crooks is not really quite so ready anyway, and we can put him and Bernal at AAA and have them split it, which they don't want to do, but those catchers aren't catching 6 days a week anyway. So I would be kind of curious, would it be a 4-2 with, Bernal taking the lead? I don't really know what would happen there if Crooks isn't in St. Louis. But there's obviously a game of musical chairs going on, and it seems like they're going to take one share away at some point, and the other 4 are going to fit in as they do. It's just difficult to ascertain because hard to count Herrera as a full catcher and believe that that's going to be true beyond 2026. And making decisions that assume that Herrera is fit for the long haul could catch you a little bit shorthanded later. But I think they're far from being shorthanded at the catcher position. So they'll be comfortable however they need to approach this.
I want to get in to the pitchers in just a second, but before we get to that, December 1st is just a few days away. Make sure that you have the DraftKings Sportsbook app downloaded on your phone and you use that promo code STL Sports to get the $300 in bonus bets when you place that first $5 bet on December 1st. And right now, you can download it today. You can set up your account today on the DraftKings Sportsbook app in Missouri before it goes live on December 1st. And you have access to kind of poke around on there and check out some of the free bets that can be made in the state of Missouri and some of the free games that you can participate in before that December 1st deadline or that December 1st date gets here for the Missouri before the Missouri betting is allowed. Again, use promo code STL Sports and score $300 in bonus bets on launch day. And you can get in on that action again on December 1st with DraftKings. The crown is yours in partnership with DraftKings Sportsbook.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 21 and over. Physically present in Missouri. Eligibility and restrictions apply. Subject to regulatory licensing requirements. Bonus bets are non-withdrawable and expire 7 days after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see sportsbook.draftkings.com/promos.
Joe Roderick, Brenden Schaeffer with you here on STL Sports Central. And also a reminder to become an STL Sports Central insider. Go to stlsportscentral.com and you see on the screen there all the perks you get with that, and all the other details can be found on the website. 2 pitchers added to the 40-man roster yesterday, as we mentioned. First one, Brycen Mautz, and the other one that is intriguing to start the season is Cooper Hjerpe, the former first-round selection by the Cardinals back in 2022 out of Oregon State. He had Tommy John surgery in April of 2025, was shut down for the season. After that, it's going to be very much up in the air as to how far away he will be when spring training starts in February, and just kind of what his role might be. A guy from the 2022 draft. It is 2026, a first round pick from 2022. You'd like to have that guy a part of your team. We have seen too many first round picks over the past few years that have made a splash with other organizations all throughout baseball. You would expect more from a first round pick by now, and getting Tommy John surgery gives him that excuse, but it is kind of a case here of, okay, it's 4 years since you've been drafted. What do we have here in Cooper Hjerpe?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And that's a tough thing. You know, sometimes you have guys that go through various periods of injury. I, from the surface, kind of hate the way the Cardinals have handled Cooper Hjerpe to this point, because it's like they were really using the kid gloves on a guy that was, a 3-year college pitcher. It's not like he, was fresh out of high school when they got him, and they really capped his innings for, that first year or two. And then it seems as though, you still had the Tommy John anyway. So I don't know if they had some underlying reasons to believe that he was a risk, got him in the house and found out, there's a risk here with some injury stuff. Obviously his mechanics are something that are very unusual. And so was that part of the reason? But where to get you, right? He eventually needed the Tommy John anyway. So it does feel like you have to simultaneously still be careful with the guy, because you don't want to rush him back too quickly from Tommy John. But at the same time, once he's back, you kind of have to see if he can let it eat or just not. You know what I mean? It's one of those where he pitched in Double-A Springfield in 2024, but only a little bit toward the end of that season. And it might just need to, skip that level, have a little bit of a go at Springfield once you're ready to be back to health, and then try to get him to AAA. I don't really know what that's going to ultimately entail. He's still relatively young, but he'll turn 25 in March before the regular season begins. So yeah, I think that's a guy that needs to make strides in 2026, or you start to go, man, this was another kind of disappointing draft pick. Like I know they tried to go slow with him, Joe. It didn't get him anywhere. I'm not saying that there weren't reasons behind the scenes of why they did that, but it's just this is one that you were excited about this player, and you're hopeful that after the Tommy John, he's able to kind of hit the ground running whenever he's able to do so.
And I'm not entirely sure on the rules of how it works with like injury designations and stuff when it comes to something like this, but I would wonder if it's one of those cases where you could put him on the 60-day to start the season, and then that opens up a 40-man spot for you at the beginning of the year, and then you do have an opportunity to not have to use him until late May, early June on the big league club if you decide to do so. You give him some leeway again, as you mentioned. I'm not saying he needs to pitch with the Cardinals, but 4 years after being drafted, sure would be nice to see what he has at the big league level.
Yeah, so it could be a little tricky, and my understanding may not be 100% right, but what I believe to be the case is that he'll be on the 40-man roster, obviously, after having been added. But if you're going to put him on the 60-day IL, he's on the big league active roster at that point because you never would have optioned him, right? And he's accruing major league service time at that point as well, even if on the injured list, like you're starting his clock per se. So I don't know, can they option him and then he's on the minor league IL, but he still counts against your 40-man. I believe that is a choice they could make as well. I don't know how it works to option a player who's coming into the season with an injury, though. So it is a little bit dicey in that regard, but maybe it's to the point where they say, service time, schmervis time. Like this was the way we had to do it, or we lose him, potentially to the Rule 5, which would have been interesting as well, right? Another team, I guess, could have taken him in the Rule 5. He wouldn't be ready for the beginning of the season, I don't think, from a health perspective after Tommy John, and they would just put him on the major league IL over there, I would guess. So it's a little bit interesting what the status is there, but it's a guy that started 4 career games in Double-A. So I don't think he's knocking on the door of big league readiness based on that. It's an interesting one, but they made the right decision to protect him. Like that was the first things first. You figure out the rest later. That's details. It would have been a little too soon to give up on a first round pick because he had Tommy John. Lots of guys end up having Tommy John.
Which brings us to the final one, and that's Brycen Mautz, the 24-year-old lefty who was also in the 2022 draft. He was the second round pick for the Cardinals that year, and a guy that's made some headlines with the Cardinals today because it was announced about an hour ago that that JJ Wetherholt and Brycen Mautz were named the players of the year for the Cardinals, the hitter of the year and pitcher of the year. Mautz 114 and 2/3 innings pitched in the minors last year with 134 strikeouts, a sub-3 ERA for the in the minors. So that was all with Springfield last year. So another bright up and coming star in the Cardinal organization, and a name that now we're going to learn a little bit about.
Yeah, and this is a guy that I would assume, start at AAA at the minimum. I wouldn't say it's impossible that he would be in your big league rotation as just one of those guys who come into spring, start for a little bit at spring camp, see what you got, and stranger things have happened. I don't think the Cardinals are in the business of wanting to rush anybody along, but as you kind of look through what some of their options will be, and their offseason moves will also tell the tale there. I think he'll be coming into spring camp looking for something to prove, and likely starting out in the AAA rotation, which means he would just be a step away. I think when we've had some of these Cardinals prospects on the pitching side, we always talk through about how you got to take it slow and one level at a time and this, that, and the other, and that's not really true in modern MLB, the way that we have seen around the league, guys be able to elevate. If you've got it, you've got it. And so I think the Cardinals, I'm not saying he's got it or not, but I think they're going to be willing to find out more about what he's got than like a John Mozeliak front office would have been. That was, I think, an aspect of things that very, very conservative in the way that the Cardinals manage things. You could also make the argument that they didn't have the types of pitching prospects under Mo in recent years that were able to ascend in that regard and do so quickly. Now, maybe with the new pitching development folks that they have in-house, could that be something that the Cardinals reap the benefit of as early as 2026 with some of these prospects like a Liam Doyle, like a Quinn Matthews as well? That's what they're hoping. I know that's what the fans are hoping for anyway.
Well, I know you're about to jump on a call with Mautz and JJ Wetherholt and talk to them about their awards that they received from the Cardinal organization. So we will be sure to touch on that tomorrow on Card Central 365, new episodes each and every day here on STL Sports Central. He is Brenden Schaeffer. I'm Joe Roderick. And as always, we are brought to you by DraftKings. The crown is yours.